Hello, this is Jason, K3JSJ with VarAC Wednesday. Thanks for tuning in to another video. In this video, I'm going to give a recap of our Week 18 operating event, as well as talk about recommendations for using GPS when you check into our weekly net. So what is VarAC Wednesday? We're a global community of ham radio operators who use VarAC to check in weekly on Wednesday using a VMO message. You can send the message to email gateways over HF or 2 meters if they're available in your area. We will collate all this information and put it on our website, announce it on social media channels. We also publish a map, and we list operators who check into the weekly net. So join us every Wednesday. You can find out information about the event at our website. I have a QR code there as well as the URL. We also encourage you to follow us on social media. We post on the Facebook group cited there, as well as Telegram channels. And with that, let's go ahead and do our Week 18 recap. Week 18 presented some challenges for operators. There was a G3 geomagnetic storm September the 2nd and 3rd, which caused some issues on HF for propagation. But despite that, we had a great number of check-ins. We had 159 operators, which is a new record for us to check in Wednesday. 13 new operators who checked in the first time. And we also want to acknowledge and thank 73 email gateway for making themselves available for checking in on the weekly message. You can find a list of all the operators, the new operators, as well as the email gateways on our website under the results section. One of the areas we also do beyond the weekly net is we offer awards to recognize amateur radio operators who participate in the weekly net as well as other operating events. One of the events that one of the awards we are sponsoring is the Pioneer Award, and this is for any operator who checks in at least 20 times in 2025. And given this is Week 18, we're just 2 weeks away from our first group of operators who will be awarded this certificate. And one of the new things this week is we provided the opportunity for operators to check into our net using GPS. Let's go ahead and go through some of the lessons learned about using GPS in VarAC. Before I do that, I want to first go over some of the formats that we accept VarAC Wednesday does in our weekly net. And these are standard formats that most of you may be aware of. The first one is called decimal degree format. And in this, you're basically just recording the GPS coordinate in degree format. But notice that you don't have a degree symbol, and you also don't see the typical north, south, east, or west. And that's because a plus sign or a minus sign is used to reflect what hemisphere you're located in. So for the latitude, the first part, if it's a plus or it's missing, that implies that you're in the northern hemisphere. A negative would indicate that you're in the southern hemisphere. Likewise, for longitude, a plus would indicate that you are in the eastern hemisphere, whereas a negative would reflect that you're in the western hemisphere. This is a standard format typically used with web maps and APIs, and one example would be Google Maps. The second format, this is what most common GPS devices use, it's a hybrid format. It's called degree decibel minutes. And you'll notice that the degree symbol is there, as well as the ordinal where the coordinates at, north, south, east, or west. The degree portion is a whole number, and then the minutes component is actually a decimal number. Notice with this format, you don't have to put no comma between the latitude and longitude. And then the final format that we accept for VarAC Wednesday is the traditional degree, minute, second format. This is typically used in printed maps and navigation. And you'll notice that the degrees and minutes are in a whole number, and they have a degree or minute sign. And then the seconds is actually in a decimal number. Notice with this format, you also have to include the ordinal, which hemisphere you're in, north and south, as well as the east and west. And keep these formats in mind. These are the ones that we accept. If you use some other format or add additional characters, we may not detect your check-in with GPS. So let's talk now about how VarAC handles GPS. There's two different ways you can configure your station. The first is manual entry, where you have a fixed GPS point that doesn't change. And the second way is auto reporting. And under this mode, you connect a GPS device to your computer either via serial port or maybe a USB port. And as your station moves and the GPS updates, you get real-time information and changes to the GPS location. VarAC has a special tag called GPS Loc. Whenever you type this tag in a chat message or you enter it into a vmail, it will automatically expand and include the GPS coordinate that you either manually entered or it will read in the last value from the GPS device. On our website, you can find a detailed document that walks through how to set up the manual GPS reporting. There's also a link to a video that has a step-by-step instruction to configure in VarAC. I'll briefly go through the process what's involved in doing that. The first is under the settings menu under radio configuration or rig configuration. Go to the GPS tab. Make sure the manual GPS data option is checked. Enter a valid GPS string, and recall what we saw two slides ago. By default, I would recommend using the degree decimal minutes format because that's the format most GPS devices use. And then finally, what you want to do, you want to click Save and Exit to save the information, but you also should verify your GPS and coordinates in Google. And the next slide, I'll show you why that is. So in one case, we had an operator in the Maryland area, let's assume in the Maryland area, and when they pulled up the map at the end of the event, their station was not located in Maryland. It was actually located in China. And to go back and troubleshoot this, you can take your GPS location that you reported, go to Google Maps and paste it in there, and then plot it on the map. So that's where that GPS coordinates will resolve to. So in this case, what happened? I said I was in Maryland, I ended up in China. It turns out that we have to check the longitude. And in this case, it was east, which was put. And in fact, if you leave off the longitude, it will default to east. So you need to explicitly state what hemisphere that you're located in to make sure that your GPS coordinates are correctly reflected on your check-in. If you prefer to use the auto reporting feature of VarAC, you can enable that by going onto the Rig Configuration GPS tab and enabling the GPS readings checkbox. You would then fill out your port information of your serial or USB device. I would recommend checking the Show Live Connections button so that way when your GPS is reading, you'll get an indication at the bottom of the screen where the most recent reading is set to. And finally, I'd recommend checking the right GPS data to file so you get debug information. Once you've set everything up, click Save and Exit. Give it a couple minutes after you plug in your GPS device, and what you should see is what's appearing on the screen at the bottom. A green background with a statement about GPS in your latitude and longitude. If you fill out your check-in message and you see a message that says no GPS data, that's most likely because you either have not configured your static GPS location in the settings menu, or there's some issue with getting GPS lock with a satellite, or a final thing is you've made a mistake in configuring the port settings. So if you do see the no GPS data, as a workaround, you can manually set the fixed GPS reporting through manual reporting for the time being, and then you can troubleshoot why the GPS device isn't working. Okay, let's go ahead and go over some do's for your check-in message. This is based upon our experience with having 18 weeks of check-ins from the weekly net. We would ask that you please use the requested format. And the reason is I write a program that Mark and I used to process the weekly check-in messages. If you choose to write your own format, the program is not going to know about it, and we're not going to find your check-ins. We have a file that we have rejected check-in messages put into, and we have to manually go through those and review everything. We would ask that you use the requested format because we don't want to spend a lot of our time going back and troubleshooting this. So it makes it a lot easier on us. It also improves the chance of you getting on the map, as well as acknowledged on the website and getting award credit. We would also ask that when you check in, you do include information on its own line. And what I mean by that is your check-in should be on the first line. On the second line, if we've requested a weather report, go ahead and include that. And then under that, include your GPS report. If it's a week that we don't do a weather report, the first line should be your check-in, the second line should be your GPS report. When you send your message through a Vmail gateway to the internet, we recommend you include your own email address on the to line. You do this by right beside our email, put a comma and put your email address to receive a carbon copy. And the reason for this is sometimes there's issues with email gateways, and if you request a copy be sent to your personal email address and you receive the message, then you know that we also received it. If you include your email address in the to line, and after several minutes you haven't received it, there could potentially be a delay at the station you connected to sending the email out. And sometimes there's been mistakes or issues at that station, and the email has not been delivered to us. So Mark and I always recommend that you, on the to line, include your own email address. So that way, if you get a copy, you know that we did as well. And then finally, verify your GPS coordinates. You can do this by checking Google Maps to make sure that what you entered is correct and where you think you should be. We'd also ask that you use the format that we requested. And the reason is we have software that processes the line, and we have a certain format we expect. So if you use another format, we may not pick up a GPS coordinate. A couple don'ts for your check-in. Please do not use your own format. Like I've already shared, we have our software written for a specific format that we have used for the net. We base this off of a common operating approach that another net uses that meets on Wednesdays. So it's very well accepted and very well used. So if you use your own format, there's an opportunity that our software will miss your check-in. It will put it in a manual review file, and Mark and I have to spend our time going back through the file, as well as sending you an email and asking you to update your message for future weeks to conform to the standard. And also, please do not add information that's not requested. This would include such things as information about your station, your QRZ page, your personal blog. Also, we've had operators throw in other information on the check-in line that we didn't ask for. And what this may do is result in us missing your check-in message. And again, it'll put it in a reject file. Mark and I have to go through that file and take a look whether we can add it to the weekly results. So we're spending our time doing that. And also, there you run the chance of not getting on the website and acknowledged and getting the awards. So let's talk about some good canned messages. A canned message is kind of like a template that when you generate it, it can be used from week to week. And on our website, we have a canned message generator that would encourage you to check out. So in this case, I have my standard canned message with my information. Yours would be different. And I've included the GPS loc tag. You'll notice that the tag appears right past the end of my check-in line. The //n will insert a new line character. And then it says GPS loc, which is what will get filled in when I use the canned message. So you can do the //n GPS loc //n, or you can go into the canned message and after the parenthesis, after the HF, you can hit the enter key and then put the GPS loc on the next line. So if you do this with your canned message setup, when you go to use the canned message, by selecting it from the canned message dropdown, it will automatically populate all your information into the VMail message. And as you'll notice, my check-in is on the first line and my GPS coordinates are on the second. Some additional example messages that are in good format. The first one on the page is in degree decimal minutes format. But I've included this because there's some additional characters. This is for a new VarAC version that's being tested. So if you have, with that version, we will accept the items in green. We detect that properly for the check-in. You can also check in using degree decimal format. And in that format, recall that you do not have north, south, east, or west, but you use either a plus or minus to include the hemisphere information. We also accept the GPS colon as valid characters. We've updated our software to accept that. One note, I have flagged some information that needs to be removed from this message, and that is the grid square provided in the check-in line. We've not been requesting that in the check-in line, and at this point, I do have some code to ignore that, but we would ask that you don't include that information when we don't ask for it. And likewise, there's a trailing comma, which should not be there. And then finally, we have a degree minute second example. And this is what it would look like if you choose to provide your information in that format. I almost forgot, there's one more example, and that's checking in with an ICS 213 message. You can find an ICS 213 message under the MCOM mode. There is a template for that. So you, at the top right of VarAC, you put it in MCOM mode, and then when you compose your vmail, there's a drop down for the template. If you'd like to, you can generate that message and then copy it into a canned message and update accordingly. So in this particular example, I want to demonstrate that when you fill out the message, there's a section 1 through 10, and you'll fill out your information in the top part of the ICS 213. Now for your check-in, you'll be in section 7 where it says message. So put your check-in line in the line under that message. So if you have a 7-dot message, hit a return there to go to the next line. Put your check-in information, hit enter again to go to the next line, and then put the GPS loc tag, and that will fill out your GPS information. If you'd like to read more about that, you can go ahead and check out our website, varacwednesday.net. Go to the About section, and then there's this particular section for the ICS 213 message. So week 19 is just around the corner. So we would give you a challenge this week. Why not go ahead and configure VarAC for GPS support? If you do have a GPS device, go through the process of connecting it to your computer and get it up and running. And then you can check in with a dynamic GPS coordinate. If you don't have a GPS device, that's fine. You can go ahead and set a manual fixed position report. And the slides I've shown here go through that. But you also can check out our website. We have a very detailed walkthrough of how that's accomplished. Also in week 19, we'd encourage you to grow the community. You can promote VarAC Wednesday to local operators in your area, as well as clubs. And finally, we would like to see you stay engaged by checking in every week, as well as subscribing to this YouTube channel and joining the Face group and Telegram channels. So thanks for tuning into this video. This has been Jason, K3JSJ. We appreciate you tuning in each week and contacting us when you have questions. And if we can be of further assistance, please do not hesitate to reach out to Mark, KB0US, or myself, K3JSJ. And until we see you next time, I will say 73.